Hot Radio, the 12 o'clock interview with Jeff Carter.
And today I'm talking to Tim Stone, who's the chairman of Steele, Raymond. They are solicitors and they're also business law experts. We're going to find out a little bit more about that in just a moment. But Tim, take us back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit how the company first started and when that was.
Steele Raymond was founded in 1979, and since then it's grown to become one of the largest and leading law firms in Dorset.
And also you're business law experts. So tell us a little bit about, for those of us who don't understand, what exactly is that?
Well, what we try to do is to advise small businesses right through to very large companies, essentially in all their legal requirements, whether that's buying property, putting terms and conditions together for their suppliers, for their customers, and helping them with employment-related matters, and lots else in between. We do a lot of setting businesses up as new startups, right through to selling them at the end of their life cycles, and hopefully enabling their owners to have a nice retirement.
Do you find that there are still many companies who don't bother, who sort of think, well, I won't need that kind of thing, only to find later on, and maybe they come to you when suddenly things have gone wrong, and maybe they thought, well, I should have done this a few years back?
We still do find those situations, Jeff, but I think people are becoming much more aware of the consequences of entering into business relationships without having things properly documented, and that actually the cost of dealing with things at the other end of the spectrum, as it were, can be much more than actually putting in place some sensible documentation at the start, which sets out the playing field for both parties.
And I guess that this is good because it protects both sides, doesn't it, really, the employer and the employee?
Yes, absolutely. What we're trying to do is to take a pragmatic and commercial approach to the advice we give. So we are there to advise both employees and employers, depending on which side we're sitting on any particular occasion, as to what would be a fair and reasonable outcome for them to try and achieve.
Now, for somebody who's never been to a solicitor, and it kind of almost, to me, because I never have, it seems like a kind of a mysterious process, and you would think, what goes on there then? So kind of talk us through it. What is it like? Let's say if it's business law, somebody runs a company, that they come to you, what happens next?
Well, I think at Steele Raymond what we try to do at the very outset is to really get under the skin of clients' businesses and understand what they really do, because I think unless you really understand what they do and how they operate and what their objectives are, it's quite difficult to give them a complete set of advice. But we try and make that experience as friendly and as painless as possible, and we hope that our environment that we create for people to come into is welcoming and enables them to use us sometimes just as a sounding board to share ideas with, and that tends to work well for us.
And I guess the advantage is, especially for business, if you set these things out before, I mean, there are lots of different areas that a business goes into. You trade with people, so they need to understand what the trading terms are. You've got people who work for you. For a business owner, there are quite a lot of different areas that you're involved in.
There are, and I think that's one of the great challenges, but also great joys of getting up every morning, is that as for all listeners who have businesses, you're never quite sure what your day is going to bring. You can plan your day out, but inevitably things crop up which you weren't expecting. But it's dealing with those and responding to those quickly and efficiently. And that's certainly something we try and do both internally as an organisation and with the advice that we give to our clients.
And I guess it helps because then you can get on and run your business. For instance, if you've got terms and conditions, so if you're dealing with a supplier, you can give those terms and conditions and then get on with running your business.
I think so. I mean, to be quite honest, Jeff, and being frank about it, things like terms and conditions and contracts, whilst they're scintillating for lawyers, are not necessarily the most exciting things for business owners and customers. So they're important, they need to be in place, but in many respects, the best place for them once they're done is sitting in a drawer, gathering dust, and the parties just then can get on with their business relationship and selling or doing whatever they're doing.
It sounds like an ideal way to run a business. We'll talk some more in just a moment. We'll talk about something which the stats show that many people don't have in place. We're going to talk about wills, and you might think, well, I'll do that next week, or maybe I'll get round to that next year. But if that time doesn't come, then what happens to those people who are left? How do they know what your wishes actually are?
Hot Radio, The 12 o'clock interview with Jeff Carter.
And we've been talking about the process of going to see a solicitor. As we've already found out, it may sound a bit scary because most of us don't do it every day of the week, but it's an important thing to do, and it is really a straightforward process. Today we're finding out more about Steele, Raymond, and we're talking to Sue Adams. Now, Sue, you specialise, and one of your areas is wills. So why is it so important for us to make a will?
Well, if you don't make a will, you've got no guarantee that your estate, your property, will go to the people that you want to give it to. It will pass into something called an intestacy, where specific rules apply, and your property and assets will go according to those rules, probably to people that you weren't expecting to leave it to. So if you want to be sure and to leave your relatives and your family secure, then it's best to write it all down first and get a proper will drawn up.
So it's important to remember that it isn't going to go to where you think it's going to go to unless you write it down and make your wishes very clear.
That's right, because the rules will apply unless you've actually done a will yourself. The rules have changed very recently, so that if you're married and you don't have any children and you don't have any descendants of any sort, then the estate will go to your spouse, but that only changed on the 1st of October this year. In other situations, other people will inherit: your parents, your brothers, your half-brothers and sisters, people that you wouldn't really expect to receive anything. So very important to actually get a will done, no matter how simple your affairs may appear to be. It's a good idea to have one.
Now, what about these things? I've often popped in a shop and you see these things. It seems that you can do anything yourself nowadays, including a do-it-yourself will. What are the disadvantages to that?
Well, the main disadvantage of that is that you're not having any advice, and you could write your will, make a mistake, not know that you've made a mistake, and end up with either the will being completely invalid or the gift that you're trying to make not being valid in itself. For instance, if you make a gift in a will and then the person who's to receive that actually witnesses your will, then that gift will be invalid, and that can easily happen when you're doing a do-it-yourself arrangement. So it's better to have specific, good advice on it.
So you really want to make sure that you sat down with a solicitor. So let's talk through the process. If somebody comes to see you, do they just sit down and have a chat? How does that actually work?
Yeah, it is like having a chat. We will guide them through all the information that they need to think about. Quite often we'll talk a bit on the phone first, and I'll say, well, have a think about these things, and then we'll go and sit down and talk it all through. It's a very relaxed procedure, and not something to put off if you haven't got a will.
Because it is a big thing, isn't it? And you want to be sure that the people you would like to be included are included. So I guess there's also you'll ask a few questions where people then need to go away and think about what the answers would be.
Quite possibly, and quite often we'll draft the will and send it out, and then we'll have another chat or another meeting to make sure that it's all as it should be.
And for somebody who's got a will, do they need to update it every now and then, or once you've done it, is that the end of it?
It's a good idea to look at it every couple of years just to make sure it's still what you wanted it to be. But you won't necessarily have to change it once you've done it.
And how would it actually work? Does somebody make an appointment to come and see you? Do they just turn up? Well, how does the process start?
It's always best if they call and make an appointment first, so that we're ready to see them when they come in. But it's a very straightforward process altogether.
And then once it's done, it's filed away. That's it, really. Then
it's stored away, and as long as they keep their eye on it over the years, as things change, perhaps they have more children or they move away, it is a good idea to keep an eye on it.
So keep an eye on the will. If you've made one out, maybe every now and then review it. One of the things that we hear about with a will is the power of attorney. What exactly is that?
Now, power of attorney is quite separate. That is something that you put in place while you're alive for the situation where you may lose mental capacity.
Right.
And so if you lose your mental capacity, then you can't manage your own affairs, and you need somebody else to do that for you. And you would obviously want somebody who you could trust and who knows your affairs well. If you don't make a power of attorney and you lose your capacity and you can't look after yourself, then someone has to make an application to the Court of Protection to become your deputy. And that's a much more lengthy and expensive process than putting in place a lasting power of attorney in advance. And one of the good things about power of attorney, it's not just for the elderly, it's for people who are in business as well. If you can imagine not being able to run your business and your family relying on the income, you would want to think about who you would want to put in place to look after that business in advance, so that you know your family is looked after.
I mean, that's an important decision, isn't it? Because
Very
obviously
important,
you
yes.
will find yourself in a position when you are unable to make that decision.
Exactly,
So doing
yeah.
that in advance is very important.
It is, and it's like an insurance policy in a sense. You've done it, you know it's done. You may never need it, but if you did, then it's much better to have it in place.
Hot Radio.